Intelligence is everywhere, potential is everywhere. Walk through any street, any city, any classroom, and you'll find people with ideas, skills, and dreams powerful enough to change their lives. And yet, most of those lives remain unchanged. Not because people aren't capable, but because they think too small, they shrink their goals before the world ever has a chance to challenge them. They aim for what feels safe, not what feels meaningful. They choose dreams that are reasonable, explainable, and acceptable to others. Dreams that won't invite criticism. Dreams that won't demand too much courage. Dreams that won't make them uncomfortable at family gatherings or questioned by friends. Slowly, quietly, they begin to design a life that fits inside other people's expectations instead of one that reflects their own potential. And the dangerous part is this small thinking often disguises itself as being practical. It sounds responsible. It sounds mature. It sounds like wisdom. I'm just being realistic. I don't want to get my hopes up. I should be grateful for what I have. But underneath that language is fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of standing out, fear of discovering what might happen if you actually went all in. Here's the truth no one tells you clearly enough: small thinking doesn't protect you. It traps you. It traps you in routines that slowly drain your energy. It traps you in jobs that pay the bills but starve your spirit. It traps you in habits that keep you busy but never fulfilled. And over time, that trap becomes familiar, comfortable even. You stop noticing how small your thinking has become because it feels normal. Everyone around you is doing the same thing, so it must be fine. But deep down, something feels off. A quiet frustration, a restlessness you can't explain, a sense that you're living below your capacity. That feeling doesn't come from failure. It comes from untapped potential. And if you're watching this right now, it's not an accident. People don't stumble into moments like this by chance. Something inside you already knows you were meant for more. You might not have words for it yet. You might not have a clear plan. But there is a part of you that refuses to believe that this level, this version, this ceiling is all there is. You've felt it in moments of silence, late at night when the noise fades and distractions disappear. You felt it when you see someone else living boldly and something inside you lights up, not with jealousy, but with recognition, as if your mind is saying, that could be me. You felt it when you imagine a bigger life and immediately talk yourself out of it. That tension you feel, that's not foolishness, that's awareness. Most people silence that awareness as quickly as it appears. They distract themselves, they stay busy, they lower the volume on that inner voice until it becomes background noise. Not because it's wrong, but because listening to it would require change, and change demands courage. Thinking big is not about arrogance. It's not about believing you're better than others. It's about believing your life has meaning beyond survival. It's about recognizing that you weren't designed just to get through the days, pay the bills, and wait for the weekends. You were designed to contribute, to create, to build, to grow. But none of that happens if your thinking never expands beyond what feels safe. The moment you think small, you don't just limit your goals, you limit your identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who doesn't take risks, someone who isn't that kind of person, someone who missed their chance. And once that story takes hold, every decision you make begins to reinforce it. You don't apply because you assume you won't get it. You don't try because you assume it won't work. You don't speak up because you assume your voice doesn't matter. But that assumption was never proven. It was inherited. Inherited from people who loved you but were afraid, from systems that rewarded conformity, from environments that valued security over significance. And without realizing it, you accepted those limits as truth. Not because they were true, but because they were repeated. Here's what makes this moment important: awareness is the beginning of transformation. The fact that you're still listening means something in you is waking up. And once you become aware of how small thinking has shaped your choices, you can't unsee it. You start noticing where you play small, where you settle, where you delay, where you compromise not because you have to, but because it feels easier. This isn't about blaming yourself. You didn't choose these patterns consciously. You learned them, and what is learned can be unlearned. Thinking big doesn't mean you suddenly have all the answers. It doesn't mean you know exactly how things will work out. It means you're willing to ask bigger questions. Instead of what's realistic for me, you start asking what's possible if I grow. Instead of what if this fails, you start asking what if this changes everything. That shift alone begins to alter how you move through the world. And here's the part most people miss: the biggest risk is not failure. The biggest risk is living a life that never challenges you to become more than you currently are. A life where your dreams stay theoretical. A life where your potential expires unused. A life where you look back one day and realize the ceiling you lived under was one you placed there yourself. Stay with this. Don't rush past this moment, because what you're about to hear isn't motivation. Motivation fades. Motivation excites you temporarily and leaves you unchanged. What this is instead is a shift in how you see yourself. And once that shifts, once you start seeing your thinking as the root of your results, your life can't go back to what it was. Not because everything will suddenly be easy. Not because fear will disappear, but because you'll no longer be able to pretend that small thinking is harmless. Once your thinking expands, your standards rise, your choices change, your excuses lose power, and the life you've been settling for will quietly become unacceptable. That's where real change begins. People who think big don't start with what they want. They don't begin with a title, a number, a lifestyle, or an outcome. Those things come later. Big thinkers start somewhere much deeper. They start with why they exist. They start with a question most people avoid because it feels uncomfortable and heavy. Why am I really here? Not what do I do for a living, not what do I want next. But why do I get up every morning at all? What problem do I feel pulled to solve? What kind of impact would feel meaningful enough to struggle for? A strong why does something powerful to the human mind. It organizes chaos. It gives direction to energy. Without it, effort feels random and exhausting. With it, effort feels purpose even when it's hard. When you don't know your why, every obstacle feels personal. Every setback feels like a sign to stop. But when you do know your why, obstacles become part of the journey instead of reasons to quit. You don't ask, why is this happening to me? You ask, what is this teaching me? Meaning changes how effort feels. The same amount of work can feel unbearable or energizing depending on whether it's connected to purpose. When effort has no meaning, it drains you. When effort is tied to a why you believe in, it strengthens you. That's why people can work long hours for something they care about and still feel alive, while others feel exhausted doing far less for something they don't. The work didn't change. The meaning did. A strong why also turns fear into fuel. Fear never disappears when you think big. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you a fantasy. Fear shows up every time you step towards something that matters. The difference is how you interpret it. Without a why, fear feels like a warning sign telling you to turn back. With a why, fear becomes a signal that you're moving in the right direction. It means you're stretching. It means you're stepping beyond what's familiar. It means the stakes are high because the outcome matters. When your why is clear, fear stops being the enemy. It becomes energy. It sharpens your focus. It forces you to prepare. It reminds you that what you're doing is important enough to feel uncomfortable for. Instead of asking, what if this goes wrong? You start asking, what if I don't try? And that question is far more powerful. Because the regret of inaction is heavier than the fear of failure when you know what you stand for. Sacrifice also feels different when it's connected to purpose. Without a why, sacrifice feels like loss. You feel like you're giving things up for nothing. You count everything you miss. You resent the effort. But with a strong why, sacrifice feels like investment. You're not losing something, you're trading it for something more meaningful. Time, comfort, convenience, and even approval become currencies you willingly spend because you know what you're building matters more. That's why people with a clear why can endure what others cannot. They can say no to distractions without feeling deprived. They can stay disciplined when motivation fades. They can keep going when progress is slow. Not because they're stronger than everyone else, but because their reason is stronger than their excuses. Their why gives them a long-term view in a short-term world. When your thinking is connected to purpose, your questions change. You stop asking, is this possible? Because that question is rooted in doubt and limitation. It looks for reasons not to move. It waits for guarantees. It demands certainty before action. And certainty rarely comes first. Instead, you start asking, how can I make this inevitable? That question assumes commitment. It assumes responsibility. It assumes that the outcome matters enough for you to adapt, learn, and persist until it happens. Inevitability doesn't mean control over everything. It means control over your response. It means you decide in advance that quitting is not an option, only adjusting is. When you adopt that mindset, failure stops being an ending and becomes feedback. You don't collapse when things don't work. You recalibrate, you learn, you refine your approach. The why stays constant even when the path changes. Big thinking isn't about ego. It's not about proving your worth or showing the world how impressive you are. In fact, ego-driven goals collapse quickly because they depend on validation. The moment recognition fades or criticism appears, motivation disappears. Purpose-driven thinking, on the other hand, is resilient. It doesn't need applause to survive. It doesn't need permission to exist. It's anchored in contribution, not comparison. When your why is about impact, your thinking naturally expands. You stop measuring success only by what you get and start measuring it by what you give, what you change, what you improve. You begin to ask how your work affects others, how your growth creates opportunities beyond yourself, how your effort can outlive you. That perspective lifts you out of small, self-centered goals and into something much larger. People who think big often appear calm in moments of uncertainty. Not because they have everything figured out, but because they're guided by something deeper than circumstances. When things go well, they stay grounded. When things go wrong, they stay steady. Their confidence doesn't come from outcomes, it comes from alignment. They know why they're doing what they're doing, and that clarity becomes their anchor. Without a why, you're easily distracted. You chase what looks good instead of what feels right. You start projects with enthusiasm and abandon them at the first sign of difficulty. You confuse movement with progress and business with purpose. But when your why is clear, focus becomes natural. You don't need to force discipline. It emerges as a byproduct of meaning. Big thinking begins the moment you stop living on the surface of your goals and start exploring their roots. It begins when you take responsibility for defining your own purpose instead of borrowing one from society, family, or fear. It begins when you decide that your life will stand for something, even if that something requires courage, patience, and discomfort. Because when your why is strong enough, your thinking has no choice but to grow. Every goal you set is not just a target you aim at in the future. It is a statement you make about yourself in the present. It is a vote for the kind of person you believe you are capable of becoming. When you choose a goal, you are quietly answering a deeper question: who am I? And whether you realize it or not, your goals shape your identity long before they shape your results. When you think small, the goals you set are designed to fit comfortably inside who you already are. They don't require you to stretch, to confront fear, or to challenge old habits. They are achievable without transformation, and that's exactly why they feel safe. Small goals allow you to stay the same while convincing yourself that you're making progress. They ask very little of you, and in return, they give very little back. Think small long enough, and you don't just build a small life. You build a small identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who plays it safe, someone who doesn't rock the boat, someone who knows their limits. Those labels feel harmless at first, even mature, but over time they become invisible walls. They shape what you attempt, what you avoid, and what you believe is off limits for you. A small identity doesn't announce itself loudly. It forms quietly through repetition. Each time you lower a goal to avoid discomfort, you reinforce the belief that discomfort is something to be avoided at all costs. Each time you choose convenience over growth, you tell yourself that growth is optional. Each time you settle for less than what you want because it feels easier, you strengthen the idea that you are not meant for more. And here's the most dangerous part: identity is self-reinforcing. Once you believe you are a certain type of person, you subconsciously make choices that confirm that belief. You don't take the opportunity because that's not me. You don't speak up because I'm not that confident. You don't aim higher because I've never been that ambitious. Over time, your behavior starts to look like evidence, even though it was shaped by belief, not ability. But when you think big, something shifts. Not all at once, not magically, but unmistakably. Big thinking forces you to confront the gap between who you are and who you must become. And that gap is uncomfortable. Big goals don't just sit there waiting to be achieved. They look back at you and demand change. They ask you to upgrade your habits, your discipline, your mindset, and your standards. When you think big, you act differently. You become more intentional with your time because you understand what's at stake. You stop drifting and start deciding. You realize that every day is casting votes, either for the person you say you want to be or the person you're trying to outgrow. Big goals make wasted time feel expensive. They sharpen your focus because distraction now has a cost. You also choose differently. The choices you once made automatically now require reflection. You start asking whether your decisions align with where you're going instead of where you've been. You choose long-term growth over short-term comfort more often. You choose learning over pretending. You choose progress over approval. These choices aren't dramatic on their own, but compounded over time, they reshape who you are. As your goals grow, your tolerance changes. You tolerate less nonsense, less negativity, less chaos disguised as entertainment, less advice from people who aren't living the life you want, less compromise with habits that drain you. When your vision is small, almost anything fits into your life. When your vision is big, everything is filtered. You become protective of your energy, your focus, and your environment, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. Big goals demand a bigger version of you. They expose weaknesses you could previously ignore. They bring your inconsistencies to the surface. They challenge stories you've been telling yourself for years. But that pressure is not a punishment. It's an invitation to grow into someone stronger, more disciplined, more courageous, and more self-aware. This is why big goals often feel uncomfortable at first. Not because they're wrong, but because they threaten the old identity you've been living under. Your mind resists not the goal itself, but the change required to pursue it. The doubt you feel is not proof that you can't do it. It's proof that you're standing at the edge of growth. A small identity keeps life predictable. A bigger identity opens up possibility. And the only way to build that bigger identity is through goals that force you to evolve. You don't become confident and then set big goals. You set big goals, and confidence is built in the process of pursuing them. You don't become disciplined and then aim higher. You aim higher, and discipline is forged under pressure. Every time you commit to a goal that stretches you, you send a new message to yourself. You say, I am someone who tries. You say, I am someone who grows. You say, I am someone who doesn't back down just because something is hard. Those messages matter. They accumulate. They begin to override the old narrative that kept you small. Over time, your identity catches up to your actions. The things that once felt intimidating start to feel normal. The standards that once felt extreme become your baseline. What used to require effort becomes habit. And you look back and realize that the biggest change was never the goal you achieved. It was the person you became while chasing it. Small goals keep you comfortable, but they keep you contained. Big goals disrupt, challenge, and demand more. But they also expand you. They force you to rise to meet them. And in doing so, they transform not just what you achieve, but who you believe you are. That is the real power of thinking big. Most people believe fear is the thing that holds them back. They point to fear as the reason they didn't try, didn't speak up, didn't take the risk. Fear becomes the villain in their story. But fear is not the enemy. Fear is honest. Fear shows up when something matters. Fear appears when you are standing at the edge of growth. The real enemy, the one that quietly shapes ordinary lives, is comfort. Comfort is subtle. It doesn't shout or threaten. It whispers. It tells you to stay where you are because it feels familiar. It convinces you that today is good enough, that there's no need to disturb the balance. Comfort doesn't tell you to quit, it tells you to wait. And waiting feels responsible. Waiting feels safe. Waiting feels wise. Until years pass and you realize you've been standing still the entire time, comfort whispers, don't risk it. It tells you that risk is reckless, that stability is success, that uncertainty is something to be avoided at all costs. It frames caution as intelligence and boldness as foolishness. It convinces you that protecting what you have is more important than pursuing what you could become. And little by little, you start designing your life around avoiding discomfort rather than creating meaning. Comfort also whispers, don't stand out. It reminds you how easy it is to blend in, to be liked, to avoid criticism. It tells you that being different is dangerous, that visibility invites judgment, that it's better to be accepted than authentic. So you soften your opinions, you lower your voice, you shrink your ambition to fit into the room. You trade originality for approval without even realizing you've made the exchange. And then comfort delivers its most dangerous message. Don't dream too loud. It tells you to keep your biggest hopes private, unspoken, and undefined. It suggests that dreaming big makes you vulnerable, that naming what you want gives others power over you. So you keep your dreams vague. You say someday instead of no. You convince yourself that it's smarter not to want too much. Fear, on the other hand, is very different. Fear doesn't ask you to stay small. Fear asks you to pay attention. It shows up when the outcome matters. It signals that you are about to step beyond what you know. Fear is the body's way of saying, this is important. The problem isn't that fear exists. The problem is when comfort is allowed to decide what you do about it. Big thinkers feel fear too. They don't have some special immunity. Their hearts race, their minds doubt, their confidence wavers. The difference is that they don't let fear sit in the driver's seat. They acknowledge it, respect it, and move forward anyway. They understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to obey it. They also understand something crucial that most people overlook: fear fades with movement, but comfort strengthens with time. The more you listen to comfort, the louder it becomes. The longer you stay in one place, the harder it feels to leave. Comfort builds habits, it builds routines, it builds justifications, and before you know it, comfort has built a cage that feels like home. This is why people often regret the things they didn't do more than the things they did. The pain of failure is sharp but temporary. The pain of comfort is dull but permanent. It doesn't hurt enough to force change, but it hurts enough to slowly drain fulfillment. You don't notice it day to day, but you feel it in moments of quiet when you realize you've been busy avoiding risk instead of pursuing growth. If your dream doesn't scare you, it's probably too small. Not because fear is the goal, but because meaningful dreams stretch you beyond your current identity. They ask you to become someone you haven't been yet. And that process will always feel uncomfortable. A dream that fits neatly into your comfort zone won't change you. It will simply decorate the life you already have. Fear, when understood properly, becomes a compass. It points toward growth. It highlights what matters. The things you fear losing, failing at, or being judged for are often the things most closely tied to your purpose. Fear is not trying to stop you. It's testing how badly you want it. Comfort, on the other hand, asks nothing of you. It lets you stay exactly as you are and calls it peace. But peace without growth eventually turns into stagnation. And stagnation erodes confidence. When you avoid challenges, you don't build strength. When you avoid discomfort, you don't build resilience. Over time, even small obstacles begin to feel overwhelming because you've trained yourself to escape instead of engage. Big thinkers choose discomfort intentionally. Not recklessly, not constantly, but deliberately. They step into situations that stretch them. They say yes before they feel ready. They accept the awkwardness of learning. They risk looking inexperienced, misunderstood, or wrong. They understand that temporary discomfort is the price of long-term freedom. Comfort promises safety, but it delivers limitation. Fear threatens discomfort, but it delivers growth. One shrinks your world, the other expands it. And every decision you make is quietly aligned with one or the other. Every time you choose the familiar over the meaningful, comfort tightens its grip. Every time you move despite fear, your confidence grows. The goal is not to eliminate fear. The goal is to stop worshiping comfort. To recognize when ease is costing you more than effort ever could. To notice when stability has turned into stagnation. To question whether the life you're protecting is actually the life you want. Because the most dangerous place to live is not in fear. It's in comfort that asks nothing and gives little back. You don't think small by accident. No one wakes up one day and decides to limit their own potential on purpose. Small thinking is learned, it's absorbed, it's shaped over time by the environment you live in and the expectations you are surrounded by. The ideas you hear repeatedly, the standards you see modeled, and the limits others accept as normal all begin to influence what you believe is possible for you. From an early age, you are taught how big is too big. You're shown what is acceptable to want and what is considered unrealistic. You hear phrases like, be practical, don't get your hopes up, and know your place. Often, these messages come from people who care about you, people who want to protect you from disappointment. But protection has a cost. It quietly teaches you to aim low enough that you won't be hurt, rather than high enough to grow. When you're surrounded by small expectations, they become invisible. You stop questioning them because everyone else seems to agree. If no one around you dreams out loud, dreaming feels irresponsible. If no one around you takes risks, risk feels reckless. If no one around you challenges the status quo, ambition feels unnecessary. Over time, you begin to confuse what is common with what is possible. Big thinking requires courage because it often means going against the emotional gravity of your environment. It means questioning assumptions that have never been questioned. It means resisting the comfort of fitting in. And sometimes that courage doesn't look dramatic. It looks like subtle, deliberate changes in what you allow to influence you. It starts with who you listen to. The voices you give access to your mind matter more than you think. If the people you listen to constantly complain, doubt, and criticize, your thinking will slowly align with theirs, not because you agree consciously, but because repetition shapes belief. Negativity, cynicism, and limitation are contagious. They spread through conversations, jokes, and casual comments that seem harmless in the moment but accumulate over time. Listening to the wrong voices doesn't just affect your mood, it affects your imagination. It narrows what you can picture for yourself. When everyone around you focuses on what can't be done, you begin to stop seeing what could be done. Big thinkers are intentional about who they allow to influence them, not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. They know that their future is being shaped by the ideas they repeatedly expose themselves to. What you consume also plays a powerful role. The books you read, the content you watch, the conversations you engage in, and even the music you surround yourself with all feed your mindset. Consumption is not neutral. Everything you take in is teaching you something, even if it's subtle. When your consumption is filled with distraction, outrage, and surface-level noise, your thinking becomes fragmented. It's hard to think big when your attention is constantly pulled in 1,000 directions. On the other hand, when you intentionally consume ideas that stretch you, challenge you, and expose you to higher standards, your thinking expands naturally. You start to see examples of what's possible. You begin to recognize patterns of growth and resilience. You realize that people who achieve meaningful things are not fundamentally different from you. They simply think differently and act consistently over time. Where you place your energy is just as important. Energy is limited. You only have so much focus, emotional capacity, and mental clarity in a day. If most of your energy is spent reacting to drama, to problems you can't control, to environments that drain you, there's very little left for creation. Big thinking requires space. It requires quiet moments to reflect, to imagine, to plan, and to question. An environment that constantly demands reaction leaves no room for intention. You become busy but not effective, active but not aligned. Over time, you may feel exhausted without knowing why. It's not because you're doing too much, it's because you're doing too little of what actually matters to you. If your environment doesn't challenge you, it will quietly shrink you, not through force, but through normalization. When mediocrity is normal, excellence feels extreme. When comfort is celebrated, growth feels unnecessary. When survival is the goal, purpose becomes optional. And without realizing it, you begin to adjust your ambitions downward to match what's around you. This is why change often feels lonely at first. When you start thinking differently, you notice the gap between your vision and your surroundings. Conversations that once felt normal begin to feel limiting. Activities that once felt entertaining begin to feel empty. This discomfort is not a sign that you're becoming disconnected. It's a sign that you're becoming aware. Creating an environment that supports big thinking doesn't always mean physically leaving. Sometimes it means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means reducing exposure. Sometimes it means seeking out new ideas, mentors, or communities that operate at a higher standard. Sometimes it means spending more time alone, thinking, learning, and reflecting rather than constantly being surrounded by noise. The environment that shaped your past does not have to shape your future. You are not obligated to remain loyal to influences that keep you small. Growth often requires uncomfortable decisions, but those decisions are investments in the person you are becoming. When you intentionally design your environment, you give big thinking a place to breathe. Your thinking is not just a product of your willpower. It's a product of what surrounds you. Change what surrounds you, and over time, your thinking will change with it. Big visions take time. That simple truth is one of the hardest things for people to accept. We live in a world that celebrates speed, instant results, and overnight success stories. We're surrounded by highlights, headlines, and finished products, but we rarely see the years of quiet effort that came before them. As a result, many people begin expecting big outcomes on small timelines, and when reality doesn't cooperate, they assume something is wrong. That's why most people quit early. Not because they lack ability, not because they aren't capable, but because results don't arrive on their schedule. They start with excitement and enthusiasm, fueled by the promise of change. They commit when motivation is high. But when progress slows, when feedback is delayed, and when the work begins to feel repetitive, doubt creeps in. They begin to question whether it's working, whether they're cut out for it, and whether it's worth continuing. Big thinkers understand something different. They play the long game. They accept from the beginning that meaningful outcomes are delayed outcomes. They don't measure success by how fast things move, but by whether they are moving in the right direction. They understand that impatience is often a misunderstanding of how growth works. Progress is almost always invisible before it's obvious. In the early stages, effort goes in, but results don't show up where others can see them. Skills are being built, habits are being formed, and understanding is deepening, but externally, nothing looks different yet. This is the phase most people misinterpret. They see no evidence and assume no progress. But just because something is invisible doesn't mean it's not happening. Think of growth like a foundation being laid underground. You can't see it, but it determines everything that will come after. If you judge the process too early, you'll abandon it before it has a chance to support anything meaningful. Big thinkers trust this phase. They keep showing up when there's no applause, no recognition, and no immediate reward. They know that the early work is not about results. It's about preparation. Consistency beats intensity, especially over time. Intensity feels powerful in the moment. It looks impressive. It creates a rush. But intensity is hard to sustain. It relies heavily on emotion and motivation, both of which fluctuate. Consistency, on the other hand, is quiet and unglamorous. It doesn't demand excitement. It demands commitment, and commitment outlasts motivation. Big thinkers don't try to do everything at once. They focus on doing the right things repeatedly. They understand that small, consistent actions compound in ways that dramatic bursts never do. One disciplined action repeated daily will outperform 1,000 inspired actions done occasionally. Consistency creates momentum, and momentum reduces resistance. Over time, what once required effort becomes routine. Patience for big thinkers is not passive, it's strategic. It's an active choice to stay engaged even when results are delayed. Passive patience waits and hopes. Strategic patience works and trusts. It understands timing. It recognizes that forcing outcomes often leads to burnout or shortcuts that undermine long-term success. Strategic patience allows you to learn from feedback without being discouraged by it. It creates space for adjustment. It helps you refine your approach rather than abandon your vision. Big thinkers expect obstacles, delays, and setbacks. They factor them into the plan instead of seeing them as signs to stop. Thinking big means trusting the process before you see the proof. This is perhaps the most difficult part. It requires faith in your direction when evidence is limited. It means continuing to invest energy, time, and focus into something that hasn't paid off yet. This kind of trust is built, not found. It grows every time you choose to stay consistent instead of quitting. Most people are trained to seek validation quickly. They want confirmation that they're on the right path before they fully commit. But big outcomes require commitment before confirmation. You often have to act like the future you want is inevitable long before it feels that way. This isn't denial, it's alignment. It's choosing to behave in ways that support your long-term vision, even when the short-term feedback is discouraging. The long game also changes how you respond to failure. When you're focused only on immediate results, failure feels final. When you're playing long-term, failure becomes information. It shows you what doesn't work, where you need to improve, and how to adapt. Big thinkers don't panic when something goes wrong. They adjust their strategy without abandoning their goal. Impatience often comes from overestimating what should happen quickly and underestimating what can happen over time. Big thinkers reverse this. They stay humble about short-term expectations and optimistic about long-term possibilities. They know that sustained effort applied intelligently produces outcomes that once seemed impossible. Over time, patience builds confidence. Not the loud kind that needs constant reassurance, but the quiet kind that comes from keeping promises to yourself. Each day you show up, even when it's hard, you reinforce your identity as someone who follows through. That identity becomes a source of strength when challenges arise. Thinking big requires accepting that the most important work often feels boring, slow, and uncertain. It requires resisting the urge to quit just because progress isn't visible yet. It requires understanding that delay is not denial. The process is doing its work, even when you can't see it. Big visions are not built in moments of inspiration. They are built in seasons of patience. Your income, your influence, your confidence, your future, all of it lives under one invisible ceiling. You can't touch it, you can't see it, and yet it quietly determines how high you are willing to climb. That ceiling is not your background, your education, or your circumstances. It's your thinking. Long before reality pushes back, your mind decides what feels possible, what feels realistic, and what feels off limits. You don't rise to what you want. Wanting is easy. Wanting costs nothing. People want better lives, more freedom, deeper confidence, and bigger opportunities every single day. Wanting is not rare. What is rare is belief. You rise to what you believe is possible for someone like you. And that belief sets the upper boundary for your effort, your courage, and your persistence. Most limits don't show up as walls. They show up as thoughts. Quiet assumptions you rarely question. Thoughts like, that's just not for people like me, or I could never do that, or maybe some people are built for that, but I'm not. These thoughts don't feel dramatic. They feel reasonable. That's what makes them dangerous. They sound like realism, but they function like ceilings. From the moment you internalize a belief about what's possible, your behavior begins to align with it. You aim lower without realizing it. You stop exploring certain opportunities before they even present themselves. You hesitate where you could have acted. Not because you consciously decided to limit yourself, but because your thinking quietly decided for you. Your income reflects this. You don't earn what you deserve. You earn what you believe you're capable of creating or negotiating. If you believe your value has a ceiling, you will unconsciously reinforce it through the choices you make, the risks you avoid, and the standards you accept. The same is true of influence. People with expanded thinking speak differently. They show up differently. They expect to be heard. That expectation changes how others respond to them. Confidence follows the same pattern. Confidence is not something you wait to feel before acting. It is something that grows as your beliefs expand and your actions follow. When you believe you can handle challenges, you step into them. When you believe you can adapt, you take risks. Each action then reinforces the belief that you are capable, creating a cycle of growth. Your future is shaped the same way, not by one decision, but by thousands of small ones guided by belief. When you believe your future is limited, you plan small, you commit halfway. You prepare for disappointment instead of possibility. When you believe your future can expand, you invest in yourself differently. You make choices that compound over time. The moment you expand your belief, your actions follow. Not instantly. Belief shifts first, behavior follows later. There is often a lag. At first, the new belief feels uncomfortable. It conflicts with old habits and familiar patterns. You may still hesitate, you may still doubt, but something subtle has changed. You begin to notice opportunities you previously ignored. You start asking different questions. You consider paths you once dismissed. Not easily either. Expanding belief is not comfortable. It challenges identity. It forces you to confront the gap between where you are and where you could be. Old beliefs resist change because they've kept you safe. New beliefs demand growth. That tension creates discomfort. Many people retreat at this stage, not because the new belief is wrong, but because it feels unfamiliar. But inevitably, actions catch up. When belief expands and is reinforced through repetition, behavior aligns. You start acting in ways that would have felt unnatural before. You take initiative, you set higher standards, you become more deliberate. These actions create results, and those results further expand belief. The ceiling lifts not all at once, but enough to allow new levels of growth. This is why external changes rarely work without internal shifts. You can change your environment, your strategy, or your goals, but if your thinking remains the same, you'll recreate the same limits in a new setting. People often change jobs, cities, or routines hoping for transformation, only to find themselves stuck in familiar patterns. The ceiling moved with them because it was internal. Expanding your thinking doesn't mean pretending challenges don't exist. It means redefining what they mean. Obstacles stop being proof that you can't and become proof that you're stretching. Failure stops being an identity and becomes an event. Difficulty stops being a signal to stop and becomes a signal to adapt. These shifts don't remove hardship, but they change your relationship with it. Your thinking also influences what you tolerate. When you believe more is possible, you become less willing to settle. You tolerate less self-sabotage, less distraction.